Thank you for having me. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be of service. Um, Hi, everybody. My name is Daniel Marquez, and I am a codependent amongst a lot of other things. I am in other 12-step programs. I have a sobriety birth date of August 16th, 1999. Uh, I just turned 23, and I actually, Luis, I'm going to be, my birthday is on the 30th of this month, so I'm 3 days away. So I get double whammy on this month for my birthday. Um, I I met Jeremiah through a last workshop. Actually, it was at CoDA of the Desert out here that I guess he joined us in that, and he gave my number to the committee so that, and they asked me to do this presentation. A little bit about me. I am with an organization called It Happens to Boys. We do workshops on trauma work of men who have been sexually abused as children. We do men because men don't come out and speak. We do really everybody. We speak to high schools and stuff. We do recovery centers, hospitals, nurses, doctors, and we do conferences. So trauma is really my base, is where this all coincides with codependency, addictions, and other other things that mental health issues that we kind of develop, or I develop through my journey. Let's see. I am a dad. My background is in psychology. That's my education, but that's not what I do for a living. What I'm going to share with you is the actual work that I have experienced and done, and have the privilege of meeting people who have done these workshops. And I'm forever grateful, because I know that if I had to pay for all that, it would be incredibly I wouldn't have the resources to pay for it all. But I have some really good mentors and healers that I've been privileged to work with, and still work with them, and on a daily basis, because I'm an ongoing project. I'm not perfection. I don't want to be perfection. I want to live and be happy, and I'm happy when I am not in charge. That's for one. So that being said, I'm a dad. I have 3 of my own biological children. I have two boys. My oldest is 36. His brother is gonna be 34. Yeah, he's 30. Man, they're getting old. And my daughter just turned 27. All of those kids have graduated college, and I am so proud of them. They have made me proud, and I'm glad I came into recovery to give them a fighting chance, because that's not where I came from. I have 6 stepchildren, and they all call me dad, and they're very active in my life. They used to call me, "Shut up, you can't tell me what to do because you're not my dad." And today they call me dad. So I'm proud of that, because my relationships weren't like that before, but they are today. What I'm going to give you, I'm going to tell you my story, and then I'm going to tell you what happened, and how I became to heal the pieces that I needed to heal, and realize where those wounds were. I'll get emotional. I didn't cry until I was 40 years old, so it took me a while. So now when I cry. So it's a it's a healing process. Emotional sobriety is big in my life. That's what when I work with men, I work on emotional sobriety, because if you're a man like me, I was not allowed to be angry. I was not allowed to cry. I was not allowed to show any weakness. And And that was the men, the wounded men that raised me, influences in my early life. Those were the things that I grew up with. My dad growing up was, he's one of 8 brothers. All of them are alcoholics and addicts. I call them beaters and cheaters. And one of them is still alive. He's not an alcoholic and addict, and he's the only one I really got to know. My dad was a heroin addict and an alcoholic. He was not really a very nice man. And I think it was better off not having him, but I had a father wound. And part of this is all relative. All of my wounds don't stem from him, but they do stem from things around him and actions that he did. When I was 5.5 years old, well, my mom, let me back up for a minute. My mom is, she's a severe codependent, untreated. She needs al-anon and she needs Codependents Anonymous. And I like to say, well, I had a lot of therapy, and I had a lot of education in psychology just to deal with my family or my mom. Now, I love my mom. She is an awesome lady, but she's kind of a prisoner of her own disease. And I can't do anything about that. I have to just love her who she is. And that took a long time to do that. She's in my life. I'm actively in hers. And I have siblings that aren't very healthy either, and they're not in any recovery at all. So I'm the only one in my immediate family, as far as my siblings and my parents go, that is in recovery. And I'm so grateful, because boy, I needed to learn how to deal with them along with myself. Okay, I'm gonna talk about my childhood here a little bit. And I hope that you can kind of relate to some of the stuff that really came about, and put some red flags up for me. I will need that. The tissues are already coming in the room here. So let's see. When I was 5.5 years old, my memories probably go back to that. I do remember a little bit earlier, probably 4. I do remember around 4 years old, but 5 was I felt like, to me, was the awakening in my life. Like I, was awake and alive. I was sexually abused by 2 men, one teenager, a young teenager, and then an older man, and they were neighbors. And they, 5.5 is first grade. They preyed on me individually when I would go to school or when I'd go out to play. And, I'm a latchkey kid, so I was always looking for, connection with people. And this is how that came about. I wasn't being monitored. My dad I had a younger brother who was mentally retarded today. And my dad would be watching him, or my dad wasn't around. And my mom had to work 3 jobs to keep us housed and fed. So I was kind of left to my own devices at a very early age. And these men would prey on me individually. They would catch me at the gas station, or behind, the dumpster of the gas station, or in the alleyways, or in the abandoned garage. And this was in Los Angeles and around the Silver Lake, Hollywood area. And I would walk to school, and at that time, while this was going on, I instantly became hyper vigilant. I became like a secret agent, is like what I always like to say, is that I became aware of everything around me. And I would be going to school and coming home, and I would be looking and anticipating all around me, in every area, watching. That's what I did. And and I think about it today, and I think about my children, and that would never. I just could not believe, that that would happen. So, and that happened for a period of a year of my life. And my first father wound was as my dad found out what was going on. And he asked me about it, and I told him, and he yelled at me and he screamed at me and he told me to get in the house. And I went in the house and he went and did whatever. And he came back and he told me I was not to tell anybody about that. I was never to speak of it ever again. And if I did, I was going to be in real big trouble. So here I am, this raped little boy. I have to carry that. And that's my first father wound. I didn't get any protection. When I was being abused, I didn't get protection. When I was crying out for my dad, I was crying out for God. Nothing happened. So then on, at that early age, I had known that the only one that could count on was me. There was nobody going to take care of me. I couldn't tell my mom because my fear of my dad. Another father wound. When I started doing this work, I didn't realize how many wounds I did have of him. And the rage and anger that I carried because of that. And that's a big part of my story. So that happened for a period of a year. And it haunted me the rest, my whole life, until I got into recovery. We ended up moving and got out of that situation. My mom had actually separated from my dad at that point. And then going through, school at this time, I was always the smaller kid. I had, we didn't have money. I always wore the same clothes. So, sometimes my shoes had holes in them and I had to put cardboard in them. And so I got bullied a lot and picked on a lot and made fun of a lot. And I was smaller, so they thought I was an easy target, but I had rage in me and I had this wounds in me. And I'm a blackout rager. So what happens to me is that when you get me to the point of tears, I black out and I got extremely violent, and I would beat up whoever was around and picking on me. And I would feel bad because, I knew I'm a hurt person, a wounded person, and I know what that feels like. And then when I see if I did that to somebody else, I also hurt. So I had that inside of me. So that's my rage. So I'm already developing my father wound. I'm already developing wounds just in general. My trauma piece is starting to come together and build up. So I did a lot of fighting in school. Violence was a prevalent part of my life. So I fought, every day, pretty much, and I got pretty good at that. But the rage was always underneath the surface, and it was hard to control at times when things arose. I'm gonna forward a little bit. During high school, the same thing. I had I had a lot of self-confident issues in high school, but my dad, let's see, I'm going to fast forward here up until when I turned 8 years old. My mom had already separated with my dad at this time, and we lived in a place, and I was going to a new school, and I started having stomach aches, and they were getting really bad, and so my mom took me to the doctor, and I had at 8 years old, I had an ulcer. And they couldn't really figure out why. They thought it was dietary. They thought all these reasons. And I do workshops for medical students and for doctors and nurses, and I this is part of one of my stories with that, because we don't our trauma wounds and manifest inside of us medically as well. And they couldn't figure that out. They couldn't tie those together. And so and then my dad at that same time ended up committing suicide, you know. So he couldn't get his way because he cheated on my mom and he wasn't a very nice guy. And so she left him and he couldn't have us. And so he committed suicide. So to me, I internalized that. I internalized everything. And that to me was I am not good enough for my dad to be my dad. So I take on that role. I didn't know that was in the beginning of my developing my codependencies and my skills in that. But that's kind of what it was. Internalizing all those things was actually making me be different to whoever difference another person was. So that's kind of where my father stopped being a part of my life, but his wounds kept coming on because I remember him beating up my mom frequently, when he was needed his money for his drug of choice, and taking our money. And I was always wondering why we had to move all the time. And that's what would happen. We'd have to move because we didn't have rent money. So we had to move again and we had to move again. And, I would always keep my stuff packed with me nice and neat in a little, suitcase. So my own belongings so that I can carry them with me. So, I didn't know that I really had a lot of rage and anger towards my dad until I was speaking. I was learning speaking. I was speaking about what the things he was doing. Like he was beating my mom, and then I was talking about my little brother who was mentally retarded. And I remember he was beating her up one time, and she was pregnant with him, big pregnant. I mean, ready to go and to labor, and he was beating and punching on her, and you can hear physically that sound. And I blamed him for why my brother is that way. And I'm still mad and angry at him when I talk about it. So my part is, I am my father's son. I'm developing my own self-worth, and that's part of it, the lack of self-worth. So all these things start, multiplying together. So now my dad's out of the picture, and we're kind of living good. We're doing okay. My mom works a lot, but still running around by myself, taking care of myself. I learned how to cook and take care of my siblings when I was 6. I'd cook breakfast for myself, and I just learned that I'd have to do it if nobody was going to do it for me, so I had to do it. When my mom was there, she did it, and she was there, but she had to work, so that was a big thing. So that's kind of my early childhood, and then I kind of thought, well, I want to hurry up and grow up because this sucks, and I always used to think that, was my childhood ever good? I used to think about that. But when I started doing this work, yeah, there was a lot of great stuff. I had a lot of good stuff. I just couldn't emotionally and mentally couldn't see it sometimes as where I am mentally and emotionally, whether, if I'm not good, that's kind of where I go to. And that kind of snowballs, if I keep thinking into that snowballs. So I started learning at this time, and even when my dad was alive, that when he was fighting with my mom, that I would interject myself into that. I would act out, or I would do things, and I learned that I could manipulate that situation. I learned that the tension was drawn to me, and it would stop. They would stop, and it was beyond me now. And I learned that at an early age. And so I started learning how to be different personalities, or different with different people. That's where my codependency really took off, because I knew that. And the problem is that as an adult, that stopped working. As a child, it worked, because the adults would look at me and they would, tend to them. So here I'm already manipulating a situation with people at a very early age. And that was a tool that I used for a long time. And it worked until it didn't work anymore. So my early childhood had a lot of trauma pieces in it. As I get older into high school, I start middle school actually was kind of really traumatizing too, because middle school was in the middle of it was a middle school that was in the middle of 5 gangs, and they were 5 prominent gangs, and they recruited every day. So I was fighting every day, sometimes twice a day. So this was, again, this is in LA, and in some of the not so good neighborhoods where they have the creative writing on the walls, and it's you got to walk around and watch all the way around you, because you never know. So I witnessed violence. There was gunshots all the time, and we'd be playing sports, and shots would ring out, and you'd have to just get down on the ground until it's gone, and then you get up and finish the game. And that kind of felt normal, to me. But in middle school, so I did a lot of fighting in middle school to stay out of gangs. I didn't want to be in a gang, and so that kind of happened. And then in high school, I did in more sports. I started being more active in sports and everything. Now, my relationship with my stepdad, because my mom had remarried, was not good, because he's an alcoholic too. But he's great at sports, and he taught me everything about sports. And it's not that he was not a bad dad or a bad guy. He was a good guy. I found out later. I'll share with you later my relationship with him, but I have father wounds with him as well. And I had my own vision of him being a dad, and my expectations were not met, so to speak. My expectations were not met, that he should have been a better dad. That's how I was thinking. And I didn't take into account that I need to understand him. We have to be mutual and have our own conversation. And I found out later he really wasn't capable of that. But so my mom remarried, and so our life got better. And but I still carried the rage and the anger and the wounds inside of me. My relationships, I couldn't really in high school. I liked some girls that I became their friends and everything, and I really liked them, but I could not bring myself to ask them to be my girlfriend, because I felt less than. And if they find out everything about me, that they're not going to love me. They're going to abandon me. It's like my dad did. And abandonment is a huge issue with me. My dad abandoned me. So there's another father wound. I didn't even know, when I came into recovery, I thought my dad died a long time ago. I was 8 years old. He couldn't have possibly, I can't possibly be suffering from any father wounds. It has to be something else. And I started doing the work. I've been married. My first wife, from my two biological children, my boys, she was severely multiple personality disorder, and she had severe trauma. She was sexually abused as a child, and I seem to attract that. The energy tracks each other, so I can go be in a room full of 100 people, and I'll pick that. because that's just me. And I've learned about that now. That's the energy that I see, that I know, and I'm familiar with, and I can say I can deal with that because I know how to be in that. And subconsciously, that's what happens to me, and I learned that. I learned to cope with that. Those are my coping. Part of my coping mechanisms was to learn how to say I can work with that. I can be in that relationship because I can work with that. Not knowing, again, I'm not knowing that I can't. I'm powerless over the other person, but I'm always thinking I can manipulate that and change that. So she, we were married a year, and I had my 2 kids with her, and then we got divorced, and that was a long court battle with my children. I thought I would never get through that. And my oldest boy, actually, earlier when I was talking, I'm at my in-laws, I said, because I'm working up here in Yucca Valley and they live here. And when my kids were growing up, my boys growing up, they lived here in Yucca Valley. And I guess my ex was moving down somewhere, and my son wanted to stay up in school up here and in Yucca Valley. So he came and lived with my in-laws, and I'm forever grateful for that, because I think he found a little peace. He got out of the chaos. I didn't realize that he was taking care of his mom and his little brother. She would isolate in a room for weeks, and he was taking care of his sister, his little brother, and his little sister. And he, from 12, I guess, on, he had to grow up, and that affects me emotionally because I was in that same role before, as I had to take on that role, and I didn't want that for him. And he's working through his stuff on that too, and I feel guilty for that I couldn't save him from that. But that's my struggle. He's doing good, the best he can do, and he knows, and we talk, and we have a great relationship. And he's a good dad. He's probably a better dad than I was. But I've never talked about that piece. This is the first time I've ever brought that up, actually. And so I know that there's something there when I'm talking about stuff and it affects me in this way. And this is what I do when I work with men, and I tell them, those are the things that are revealed to you. More will be revealed. And this is part of what that big book tells me. And now that I know this, I'm going to have to do a little bit of work on this, because I know that it's still there. I was taught that by my sponsors. I have 2 sponsors because I'm sicker than most. One sponsor appointed me. He said he was going to be my sponsor because I wouldn't pick anybody, and I'm too picky, and I'm too smart. He said, you're too smart for your own good, and I would never pick anybody. So he appointed me. He's going to be my sponsor, and he said, I'm going to be your sponsor. You go get another sponsor. He says, your problem is not drinking. Your problem is relationships. You don't know what they are. You don't know how to have them. You don't even have one with yourself. You don't have one with God. And he goes, so I'm going to work with you on that. You go get another sponsor and you work on the other program with that guy. And I did that. This is the first time in my life. I was 40 years old, fresh out of rehab, and I was falling apart. And it's the first time I was alone by myself. I didn't have my kids with me because I needed to get sober. I needed to get well. I needed help. And so I was doing that. And I started doing my meetings, and I had my other sponsor told me, I'm a dad. I got 3 daughters. I don't want you wasting my time. I'm going to help you. I'm not here for a ride. I'm not here for this. And then he said, and when you go to meetings, he says, I want you to wear a shirt with sleeves, because I used to wear tank tops all the time. You know, that was my thing. And he goes, I want you to wear a shirt with sleeves, and I want you to sit in the front row, and you're not in the back row. And I did that, and I listened to him. And it was the first time that men have been my abusers my life. And this is the first time that I ever took direction from a man without telling him to go screw himself. And so I worked with him on that side of my addiction side. And ironically, I found out that I was so codependent that my other sponsor, who was working with me on the relationships, had finally got me to see where my codependency was feeding me, illusions, disillusions, I guess, about my relationships and what I'm thinking about a relationship, what it is. And he worked with me, and I called him every day, and I cried every day. And then he said, I needed to know about HALT, which is HALT, HALT, never hungry, never alone, no, never angry, never lonely, and never tired. And that was kind of my go-to at the early age, was to do, early time of my sobriety, was I had to figure those out. Am I taking care of myself? And this is the beginning of my self-care. And I didn't realize how I didn't take care of myself. I really just didn't. I was busy taking care of everybody else, and that was my excuse. And I didn't know how to be by myself at this time. It was the most uncomfortable time in my life. I didn't have any drugs. I didn't have any alcohol. I couldn't smother myself and drown that stuff out. I was like an open wound, and I had great anxiety. I call it was my period of being alone with the enemy. And that was a really, really hard time in my life. But I needed it. I needed to change. And the reason I needed to change is because when I went into the Betty Ford Center, I admitted myself into the Betty Ford Center because at that time I had just gotten married. And I married the boss's daughter. I don't recommend that. It's not a good idea. Please, nobody do that. I already tested that out. Okay. It does not work. Don't do it. I don't care what you're thinking. Stop, check with somebody before you do that. Okay. Because it's not a good idea. So I married her because she was from Tennessee, for one, and she had that Southern draw and oh baby and that melts your heart. And I'm a very shallow individual, so she was blonde hair, green eyes, and had all the right stuff. And I'm sure everybody here knows what I'm talking about. So that's how shallow I am, because I'm thinking, well, that looks good, so it'll make me look good, because I'm rotten on the inside and everything's bad. So if I have this, people are going to see that, and they're going to know that I'm okay. Well, she was 16 years younger than me, and things, it only lasted 6 months when I found out why she's in my life. But it became my kids and my exes, and all this was, the issues. And then finally, she said, no, you're an alcoholic. And I said, I'm not. And I said, I'm going to prove to you. So I said, I'm going to prove to you I'm not. And my best thinking was, I'm going to admit myself into the Betty Ford Center. I'm going to show everybody, show her basically, that I'm not an alcoholic. Well, that was the beginning of my sobriety, because I went in there, and I have been in rehab many times before, but it works when it works. And and it started clicking with me. And when that started clicking with me is that I was going through the family session of this program that I was going into with the Betty Ford Center, and I saw my role. They were describing all of the, they had the alcoholic and the enabler, the codependents, and then they had the kids and how they all interact with each other. And they call it the dance, the family dance, and how we dance. The codependent dance is what it was called, actually, and how we dance around the big elephant in the room. In that dynamic, that's the dysfunctional family. And I was learning about that. And I didn't really identify with the addiction side or the alcoholic side. I identified with the child that they were talking about. And they were talking about me and my role. They showed me what I was in my family. And in that session, they were doing a workshop. And it was a presentation with Jerry Moe. He was the director of the children's program of Betty Ford Center, and he is my mentor, and he is a good friend to this day. And Claudia Black. Now, I would throw these names out for you, and I hope you look them up and see what they have to offer, because I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them. That was the beginning. Claudia Black does a lot of work with children, and she really defines pieces of how codependency develops in kids and what their roles are in the family. And that's kind of where I needed to be. I needed that piece so that I needed that piece because it was the kid part of me. So they were doing a presentation on guilt and shame. And during that presentation, Jerry is so elegant. Again, please look him up. He has YouTube videos on the children, and so does Claudia Black. And he was talking about carrying stuff in a backpack, bags of rocks, emotions, anger, hurt, harm, and this is the weight that I'm carrying. And he was talking like that in a child's voice, and he kept, it was like a little kid. Here's a grown man, and he was talking like a little kid and being like a little kid and everything. I thought, wow, there's no shame there. What would that feel like to be able to have that, right? To be able to be childlike and enjoy that fun. And he was doing that presentation, and they both were doing the presentation. And then I just realized that I just had all these tears coming down my face, and I felt like a nudge coming in the side of me. And it was like my little child in me telling me, he's talking to you, and you need to pay attention. And it was at that moment that I know that my child wounds were really on the surface. They were there. And it was that day I found out that my child was in charge of my life, not me, my wounded child. So the last thing about Betty Ford, and then I'm going to move on to certain things that really started healing my codependent self, and what it took for me to really kind of surrender to that. Well, I had my kids, my two boys. I actually had three boys at that time, my stepson Marcus, but my boys were in the children's program with Jerry Moe. And I had it was their time, and they had a little circle of chairs. All the parents were in the chair, in the chairs around the circle, and then they had my three boys in the middle of the circle, and then I had my chair opposite them. And Jerry said that you got to listen to your kids. They're going to tell you what you need to, what from their point of view, what you need to hear. And so I sat down. He said, you can't respond. You can't do anything. You have to listen to your kids, and we'll talk later about what they have to tell you. And one by one, they told me how much they hated me. then they told me that they didn't want to live with me anymore, and I was just trying to be a dad and be a single dad. And then I don't realize things. But what hurt the most out of really everything in my whole life was that my children were afraid of me. And it was that moment I realized I became my dad. Even though my dad wasn't in my life, I became him. So I knew that I needed to change those pieces. So those are just some of the small trauma pieces that I had really kind of learned and developed in my beginning of my sobriety and healthcare. So I'll leave it at that so we can go ahead and do the break. And then I would like to come back and get onto the healing parts. You kind of know, now you know that I do suffer from a lot of wounds. You suffer from the pieces, and I used to think I was alone and nobody else could experience that, and I hid that and I wouldn't share that with anybody until I was 40 years old. But I know I'm not alone now, so I'm hoping that you guys can relate to some of that. Well, I'm glad everybody had a little break. Well, you kind of got an idea of my early life and some of the traumas that I have. Not, I don't only have just the father wound. I mean, I have wounds from, my relationships, and, from the mother wound. I have a mother wound as well. But since we're focusing more on a father wound, for you women, the mother wound is the same. Okay. It's the same for you. And you women also suffer from the father wound. I have 3 girls. 2 of them are my stepdaughters, and then one of them's my biological daughter. She's 27. One of my stepdaughters is 27. They're the same age. They were friends. And then her sisters, she's just turned 30, and they have father wounds because their dads, my stepdaughters, their dads are not in the picture. He's not dad. So my daughter Ashley says, "You're my dad. I never even met that guy. I don't care about him or whatever. You're my dad." And she said, "When you go, I'm gonna take your ashes and put them in a necklace and carry you around." So she tells me. I said, "Well, what about your other siblings? Are you you're gonna spread the ashes around or what?" But I have that relationship with them, and I've dealt with their father wounds as well. My biological daughter, she had the father wound with me, which she thought it was me, but it wasn't me. It was directed at me, and I had a lot of that as well. It was, her mom was an alcoholic and an addict too, and her mom had just passed, and not too long before we got to have our little discussion with each other and had it out. She said, "I still have some issues with you, Dad, and I want to have them and take them out with you." And I said, "Well, I'll agree to that, but I want to have a mutual person, a mediator in the room." And I said, "I'll let you pick that mediator," which was her oldest brother. And we had it out, and he did a great job because she would go off. She's her father's child, and she's codependent just like her dad. She's more like me than any of my other kids, but she would go off on something and he would stop her and say, "Okay, time out. You got to come back here." And he would say, "That's not what you're saying that Dad did. That's not true." And he would bring her in, and what we found out is that she was hurt but from her mom, and she had a lot of wounds from her mom, but it was safe to direct it at me. And I'm okay with that. And we learned how to work through that together. And I'm blessed. I'm blessed that I can do that kind of work with my kids. I had to kind of grow up to do that, though. So this is part of the journey. So I want to go into the healing parts, and where I recognize myself, my authentic self. And I'm telling you, I'm very big on emotional sobriety. There's a lot of men that I deal with, as soon as a tear comes up, they start moving and start changing the topic and start going off. And I said, well, wait a minute, we need to come back here and sit here, right here, and do what we were doing just a minute ago, and redirect yourself. And that's hard to do. If you're a man like me, and where I come from, that was hard to do. I wasn't allowed to be, again, I wasn't allowed to be angry. I wasn't allowed to be myself. So I had to be what you wanted me to be. And I didn't realize that until I went into recovery, and I started learning about that and my role in that. So I knew that I had to kind of make peace with myself. And what happened is that I ended up in a group, an AMAC group, which is adults molested as children. And I was at the Barbara Sinatra Center. And it was on a Wednesday, and it was once a week. And they were very, very adamant, very, very good too, as well as that you needed to participate or you're out of the group. And it was a co-ed group, mind you. And I was in that group for 9 years. And I basically became the only co-ed in that group. I was in a group of women, 6 women and myself, plus the therapists were women too. So I was surrounded by women, and I was terrified. Okay, I was terrified because I knew those women, that their abusers were men, and but my abusers were men as well. So I started in that group, and I was afraid, and they were afraid, and we kind of got some common ground. But what was pretty wonderful about that is that I started doing work with the women, and we did a lot of role play. And if you guys have ever done role play, I was usually the bad guy. So I was on the bad side of that role play from the women. And that was really uncomfortable for me. But it was really beneficial because I could see and understand what they were feeling and what they saw and how their actions and reactions were. And so I had started learning that I can do role play with them as well. We did a lot of exercises in that group. It was an interactive group. One of the interactive things that we were doing is we were doing a guided meditation. And the guided meditation is that we sat quietly and calm, you close your eyes, you picture yourself going into an elevator, going down to the elevator, and it opens up. And when the door opens up, you see your child. Well, while they were doing this meditation, and this is where the light bulb really came off for me, everybody had their eyes closed and they were following, and I'm just sitting back looking with my eyes open. And the reason I have my eyes open because I know somebody's going to be looking at me, right? And then while they're doing this exercise, it dawned on me when the therapists are looking at me that I'm the only one in that room with my eyes open. Nobody cares. And it was at that moment that I realized that I have some deeper seated issues more than just drug addiction or just hurt and harm, is that my codependency won't allow me to heal. That was the biggest obstacle I needed to overcome, is that my codependency was so aware of everybody around me that it wouldn't allow me to heal. It wouldn't allow me access to be myself. It was so on guard and so guarded. And I realized that I needed that. I was the sickest man in that room. And I started becoming willing and wanting to get better. And John Bradshaw, God rest his soul, he was a healer in the 80s and on through. He is one of our, I had the privilege of speaking with him for a few years before he passed away. his big mantra is that in order for you to heal, in order for you to get better and to get well, you had to come out. You had to come out of hiding. You had to come out. The jig is up. Everybody else knows but you. You had to come out. And that was big. It was huge. And that was one of the things that I learned from him, is that if I, you can't heal a problem if you're not admitting your problems. And I'm admitting I'm the problem because I can't admit it. So that's kind of a huge piece. That was in the beginning. And I started doing some work with him on my inner child. My inner child and my adult self had to learn how to come to peace with each other, because they were at battle with me. They were in a battle of who is going to have control over this guy. And the man that got angry and rageful and blackout rage was the child, and it wasn't the adult. So I had to actually learn how to be an adult. I had to reparent myself. And John Bradshaw, working with him on the child wounds, he had some, the father wound was a big one for him, but it's guilt and shame, healing the shame that binds us. And if he has actually, they're on YouTube, you can find him on YouTube as well. And he does that presentation that, I believe that one is 6 parts. And he does so eloquently explain and define our inner child, the codependent little child, the wounded child, and how that correlates with the adult, and where we need to make peace and how that looks. And so I started doing that work with him, and it was amazing how I did not understand who I was. I really had no clue of the man that I wanted to be. And in fact, at this point in my life, I didn't know what my purpose was. I had no purpose. And that was probably one of the biggest struggles I had for myself, is because I had no self-worth. And then what am I here for? I had suicide tendencies. My dad committed suicide. I might as well commit suicide. Those things all add energy, just is a generational energy as well. I'm not only an alcoholic and an addict, and that's only 50% genetics. The other part of my disease is environmental. So if I'm in an environment that has that, then I'm more likely to have both. And so I did some exercise with John Bradshaw. Okay, good. I'm going to try to do this little exercise that we did with John Bradshaw. So the inner child work was really, really enormous. I know there a lot of people think it's overused, that word's overused, but it felt so, how can I say, foreign, it felt so uncomfortable doing that kind of work that I knew that it was necessary. And to be able to really meditate, be in a meditative state, and actually visualize yourself and come to peace with yourself was a huge piece for me. Meditation, I found out through meditation, guided meditation. And the empty chair, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the empty chair exercise, where you put something in the chair, or it could be empty, and you interact with yourself. And usually you could do that with a sponsor, you could do that with a therapist, or in a group. I never really have ever had one-on-one therapy. All of my therapy has been in group. I've been in the women's group for, like I said, I was in that group for 9 years. I was also in a men's group, a men's recovery group for the same time. And in fact, in that men's recovery group, I brought up my sexual abuse, and the men in that room, their chairs were scooting back so far, and I can see them just becoming just uncomfortable, and they didn't know what to do with that. They're trying to be sober and that. And then the therapist finally told me, he says, you know what? He goes, these guys are not where you are. They're not ready to deal with that. And he said, so if you can take that piece to your AMAC group and keep that in there, it would be helpful. He says, when they come out to that point, then we can work on that. But he says, they're not ready for this. And so I kind of started understanding where I was in my sobriety. I call well-briety, you could call it. And so everything's starting to come clear. I know I'm seeing through all the fogs. Now I've been sober for a while. And my emotions are still, coming, and like I'll be at a stop sign and somehow I'll start crying, it's like, so there's stuff coming up. And I'm not trying to stop that now. I'm going with it. This is what I've been taught, to go with that. It's coming out for a reason. Once you start pushing that stuff down, you're going to go right back to where you were. So I have to keep going, and this is what was being taught to me at the time. So I also did some work with John Lee, and he has multiple books, but you can look him up. He does a lot of anger work, and I did a lot of rage and anger work with me. And the anger part is present, is what he told me. And he says the rage is historic. So historic means it's history, it's from the past, it's something that's undealt with, and that needs to be dealt with to be in the present, so that I can be angry about it, but I don't have to rage about it and take me over, because it'll take me over and then I don't get better. So I did a lot of anger work with John Lee, and still do. I still speak with him. And he also does a lot of codependent work as well. So you can look him up as well, John Lee. He actually took over for John Bradshaw for a while when John Bradshaw passed away. But he's doing his own stuff now. And he speaks at our conference with us as well on trauma, on how that correlates into our healing. So I like to say that I have many parts in myself, and I have to treat each one of those pieces. And they don't come up, they're not presented to me all at one time. And this is why I said, if I start working on one thing, all of a sudden I find out another thing. And then that means that this is how my progression is going to go. I don't have to hurry into it. I don't have to look for it. It starts presenting itself once I start doing the work that I need to do. So yeah, my rage started subsiding. I haven't raged in a long time. I started learning to come to terms with the rage that my child had, that the adult experienced. The adult experienced it and the child experienced it. So they both together needed to become peace with each other. And that was the battle that I was having. The inner battle inside was me. So we did a workshop on the father wound, actually, with John Bradshaw, and I did it with my son Jason. He's my second oldest boy, and it was a 2-day workshop, and it was a long workshop, but we did it, and at the end of that workshop, so much was revealed. In the beginning, we were so blocked off that we couldn't hear anything, it's like he's saying this, he's going through this guided meditation, but I'm not understanding. It doesn't fit with me. So he put on a song, and then when he put this song on, immediately, I mean, it was instantly, something just came over me. And my son as well. He said he felt the same thing. And what I found out is that I'm influenced by sounds. Okay. So I have done, I don't know if any of you have heard or done them, but they're called sound baths. And somebody plays gongs and bowls that make sound, and chimes and everything. And if you rest yourself in a meditated state and listen to those sounds, you could probably find some of it on YouTube, and those sounds will actually bring up your pieces that you need to work on, or what you're struggling with at that time. And that kind of will help you come up to where you need to be as far as knowing yourself. You'll kind of feel certain things. And for me, I've done that many times, and something comes up different every time. And I always like to say it's something that I need to work on, basically. So when he put that song on, it immediately hit me and hit the pieces that I needed. It got the sounds got in touch with what I needed. And I want to try to play that song for you when we hear in a second, and to see if you guys can hear that, and see if that resonates with you, if you can feel something coming up. And then then you can kind of understand some of the work that needs to be done. And you can find them, you can find them on YouTube. I don't know what's in your community. You could probably look for people and ask those questions about work like that. He wrote this song for John Bradshaw to do this exercise that I had done with him and my son. And what happened with my son is that we were in tears, and we, after the workshop was done, not done, the music was done, we had to write with our non-dominant hand, just write out what we were feeling right there. And it doesn't have to be legible. It doesn't have to make any sense, because you're going to know what it is. You're going to write it down. And then you usually get into a group of like 5 people or 4 people, and then you share with that other person what that was, what that felt like. Now, the reason why you do the non-dominant hand, because that's the closest to your emotion. That your dominant hand really controls yourself and your mental state, and so the non-dominant hand is the one that's going to help you be a little more free and experience what you need to. Sounds silly, but believe me, it works. It works. I have nothing to say against it. But when we did that exercise, we found out, my son was saying, I thought I had, father wounds with you, Dad, but it wasn't. It was my mom. And, but he said he felt safe to take it out on me. So that's some of the stuff that comes up when you do that kind of work. And he has a YouTube on that as well, on doing that exercise. The John Bradshaw does. Dick Wagner is the guy that made the song, and it's called Remember the Child. Maybe if we could kind of sit quiet and play that song, if you can put that song up and we can all listen to that together. And basically would like you guys to kind of just be quiet and try to see yourself as a child. Try to get in touch with yourself. Actually, just try to calm. Yeah, there it is. Just calm yourself and try to imagine yourself as a little child. See if you can see yourself. And maybe we can play that. Let's say sit quiet for about a minute, and I'll shut up here. And just think of yourself as a child, and what you needed as a child, and who you looked up to, or who you wanted, or the comfort you needed. And then we can play this. So we'll be quiet, and then you can start this at any time. So come back and sit with yourself and kind of think about what you experienced. That helps to reflect on some things. And I know for me, instantly, it brings me back. And if something came up for you, write it down. You can write it down with either hand, but you can write it down and know to yourself that that's something that you might need to look at and go into and work on. That's what I do. That's something personal. Again, those pieces that come up for me are that child. And in that song, I experience a lot of that. It's very familiar to me, so it brings up the sadness. And there's good sadness. It's good to be sad. It's good. Anger is good too. Joy is good. Happiness is good. But I need to experience that to get the joy, and to kind of understand that. So that was kind of one of the exercises I did with John Bradshaw, and it really opened my eyes to how much I had inside of me that I needed to get out, and I needed to let go. And again, that's what he says: you got to come out, or you're not going to get better. You got to come out. So that's the big piece that that I have worked on. I'm kind of in a spot now to where I am like this with my child. So now I can be childish or childlike. I don't, well, maybe childlike. And I can experience that joy, the true joy from that perspective, and enjoy. I really, this is the first time in my life that I've really been enjoying everything. I enjoy things. Do I still have grown-up things to worry about? Yeah, I got to work. I got to pay bills. I can help people. I don't have to take care of people. I'm not obligated to take care. I can volunteer or not volunteer. Those are my codependent issues that I have, because I am I'm going to do it. I'm a human doing, and that's where I become in my codependent, is that I'm going to do, because if I get back when I do from everybody. I get everything back. I get praise. I get, oh, thank you, you're so good and everything. But the doing the part is for a reason. Okay, that's the codependent part of it. If I'm doing it just to do it because that's how I feel good, or that's what I'm doing it because I can or I want to, that's the different part. And that's the battle that used to be. Now I do things because I love to do things. I love to be of service, and I love to help people. And if my experiences help those people, then that's what I'm going to do. And I want to do that. So did anybody experience anything for them? Did they feel something just from the sound of that, of the song? Okay, I saw one hand. So, yeah. So, okay. So if you can kind of understand now how deep we go into our emotions, and it's important to allow us to do that, and that's the part of my emotional sobriety. Allowing myself to be free. It's my authentic self, and to be free and to experience those emotions. They're good. They're not bad. I was told they were bad. I found out the reason why my dad didn't like me to cry is because it made him uncomfortable. And the reason why is because he didn't know how to cry. He wasn't allowed to as well. He was wounded. So I have generations of woundedness coming down from a man's perspective. Why our society teaches us men, sacrifice yourself for your country, be a man, toughen up, don't cry, boys don't cry, don't ever tell your kids that, don't ever tell your boy that. I don't care, daughters, sons, or daughters, let everybody can cry, let them be themselves. I was guilty of that. I did not allow my boys to be themselves. And that's why they were afraid of me, just like I was afraid of my dad. Those are the generational pieces that I started learning. So I had to learn to be a different dad. And what was taught to me by my sponsors was I had no idea how to do this. I had no idea how to be a dad. I didn't know how to be a grown-up, okay? I had to start from scratch. So I had to be the dad that I always wanted growing up. So those were the kind of the ideas and the tasks that were given to me. Be the dad that you've always wanted growing up. And that was not an easy task, but because it's uncomfortable, and I digress sometimes, but it got easier and easier the more I started doing those things that I needed to do, and allowing my children to have a voice. I found out I was uncomfortable and felt out of control because I didn't control my kids, or I didn't control them, of what they were doing, instead of allowing them to do with themselves. A big thing I want to share with you. I was so codependent that I didn't allow my kids to grow. Okay. And an example of that is that I was a human doing at this time with my children. So they would spill milk, or they would do something that I needed to be cleaned up. And I would be telling them how to clean it up. And they weren't doing it the way I was telling them. Okay. So then I get frustrated and I push them aside and I do it myself. So now I'm not even teaching my children how to do things, because I'm so codependent and I have to have that control, and it has to be this way. And I never realized that, but I do. I mean, that was another big thing that was brought to my attention. And just little things like that, the illusion of control was so damning to me and so dangerous, is that I wasn't even aware of it. It was just a reaction. So I had to really start learning these pieces that I'm kind of sharing with you, is that inner battle with my child, how to be okay. And it's okay. One of the things was an exercise my sponsor gave me too, is that I was in a battle with my kids, my grown kids. They were out of high school and they were going to get ready to go to, they were going to the junior college here in the community college. And they were living with me. And I have this thing about my kitchen, because my kitchen has to be perfect. And, the labels of all the stuff have to be, when you open it, you got to see them, and everything has to be in its place, because somebody might come over and see my kitchen and say, oh, he's a slob. Okay. That's how sick I was. Okay. That was me. And I could not go to sleep with the dishes in the sink. Okay. And so I was complaining to my sponsor. I said, man, my kids they're home all day, and the sink. I come home every day. There's dishes in the sink, and there's a dishwasher, and they can't even put it in the dishwasher. I was ranting, and he laughs at me and he says, we need to do some work right there, don't we? And he said, did you tell your other sponsor that too? And I go, no. He says, okay, well, you're going to have to tell him that. I said, okay. He goes, but I'm going to tell you this. From now on, this is what you're going to do. When you come home and there's dishes in the sink or anything in the house that's out of place that bothers you, I want you to fix it or clean it or do whatever you need to do to make it the way you want it by yourself. And no complaining. Don't even say a word to them, and don't tell them. My response was, well, how in the heck are they going to learn if I'm not telling them that? And he goes, it's not for them. He goes, it's you have to do this. And so I started doing it, and he was right. I started learning that, it's not worth the energy that I've been putting in. That's something as ridiculous as a dish in a sink. And my perspective was just really way off. And I needed to understand that. And this is what my sponsor told me to do. And I did it. He said, how's that going? And, I'm going to tell you, the first week of doing that, I was pissed off and angry. And then the second week of that, it just became a routine. And then after that, it became like nothing. And you know what? My kids started doing it without me telling them. And it was a huge lesson for me that I needed to get out of the way. And if things bother me, then I just need to do it. And so I do that now. I think my girlfriend's listening. I told her that too. So, but I tease her and I love her. That kind of stuff really interfered with my relationships, because I was like that with my wives. I did laundry, I did dishes, everything had to be in its place. I cleaned, I cooked. Essentially, my relationship with my wives were not good because I didn't allow them to be a part of me, of life. I did everything, and I did everything because I wanted them to love me. Okay, this is me. I didn't know that all they wanted to do was be my partner and be a team and be part of. So for me being so controlling in that, I didn't allow them to have a place in my life. And that was another thing I needed to learn. It was something that I had to come to terms with. And that directly stems from my abuse, my sexual abuse, is that I felt so broken and so wounded that I had to do things and be the human doing to get external gratification or satisfaction or praise. And my sponsor told me that that's an inside job and you have to get that for yourself. And in that struggle that I was having, I was alone again, and I was struggling, and I broke down. I told my sponsor, I said, when am I going to find somebody to love me? When am I going to find that person? And he says, we're working on that. And he goes, and if you want the answer to that, I'm going to tell you the answer to that. When you love and respect yourself enough to let people be who they are, you'll find someone. That was a hard lesson to learn. But it works. And he's right. They're all right. I'm grateful. I'm grateful for what I learned. Okay, we got 8 minutes here. I want to tell you also another big piece, because we're running out of time. You're right, it could be a two-parter. So we're running out of time, but I want to share something that when I came into my sobriety, when I came into recovery, I was spiritually bankrupt. God certainly never helped me, or did I think he did? And I really didn't like organized religion. I still don't like organized religion, but I have a spiritual bound now. I had to learn how the calmness, self-forgiving, joy, and just being comfortable inside myself came from a spiritual part of my life. And I started learning that through the Native American culture, is how I got that. I had to find something spiritual. First it was my groups, and then it was, then I had to find a higher power. And I learned that through the Native Americans, because they everything's alive. Everything has a purpose, and they worship everything. And that gives respect to other people. That gives respect to everything that's around me, that I'm here for a purpose, and I'm in harmony with the earth, and I'm in harmony with society and my part. But the big part that opened my eyes was when I was in the Betty Ford Center. The spiritual guidance counselor asked me about when did you think God was evident in your life? And I immediately lashed out, and using some really not so good words, that he had never been in my life ever. And so we went and broke it down. He says, okay, you're going to be tough. So we broke it down. He said, let me ask you something. He said, when did your sexual abuse start? Because that seemed to be your first trauma as a child, was the worst one that you had. And I had told him, I said, my dad came home one time with this big shaggy dog. It's like an Australian sheepdog, a big shaggy dog. Shaggy is what I've named him. The dog, we were sleeping in our room. My brother and I shared a room, and it was like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. And my dad came in, our room all drunk, really, 3 o'clock in the morning. And the dog came in, and that dog just jetted over into my bed and jumped on top of me, just jumped on me, just like boom, like that. And I just immediately just out of a dead sleep, just grabbed a hold of that dog. I go, can we keep him? Can we keep him? He goes, well, I don't know. We have to find the owner to see where he is. And we found the dog, and the owner goes, that dog runs away all the time. If he can, you can have him. If he stays with you, you can have him. So we kept that dog. And I love Shaggy. And Shaggy went with me everywhere. It even walked to school with me. It waited for me. It never left my side. And it didn't like my dad. If my dad got close to me, it would growl at him. And didn't like my brother. My brother couldn't get next to me either. So I had this ally with me. And then when I went out to play and my abusers came after me individually and attacked them. So the counselor says, oh, so God sent you a dog, huh? To stop your abuse. Because ironically, dog spelled backwards, right? So that was the first awakening into my spiritual journey. And I had to open up those wounds. And I was learning that people were in my life for different things. The wife I thought I was in my life to get me sober, to get me into rehab. My dad was only in my life to give me life, not to be my dad. Shaggy was in my life to give me a start. And that's part of my journey. This is only, this is only part of my story too. But I hope it's part that you can identify with and understand the pieces that you have to come to be where you need to be. And I hope that you can get some of this. Please look up the names that I give you, the people that I've done work with personally. I've done work with a lot more, let me tell you, a lot more. And I don't take it for granted. Most people have to pay for this. I, for some reason, have got this for free. And I share this because it doesn't do any good sitting here inside this by myself. And it does only good it does is to share that with you. And, be the best you can be the best human you can be. Enjoy your life. Give yourself a break. I had to learn how to do that. Forgive yourself. Number one, forgive yourself. Begin. Thank you for having me. Peace out.